Hello, everyone. I think this is the third week in a row where you're hearing from future Alanah. I am not in this episode because I'm in a country where the internet isn't fast enough for me to maintain a Zoom call. Haven't been able to do any of my work video meetings or anything. But related to that, because I am currently unable to record the podcast, we will also be skipping the next 2 weeks. It kind of depends when I'm allowed back in LA, but for now, I'm pretty sure the next episode of the podcast will release on the 20th. I just decided to give everybody a break since I can't produce it right now. So why not just give the boys 2 weeks off? So there is this episode, of course, and then we will not have episodes for the 6th and the 13th. And if that gets any later, I will let you all know. If you want updates in more real time, you can follow PWL_podcast on Twitter and Instagram. Otherwise, enjoy the episode.
I was going to do an Alanah now.
Yeah, she's represented. Look at you with the undercut.
You like that? It's a little scruffy at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're drinking a coffee?
I'm not. I'm secretly drinking Pepsi from a coffee mug. So
now that's just willfully misleading.
That's misleading. That's it's been a tough couple of days, but I don't want to necessarily talk about it, so I'm putting on the front of a mug. It's actually just I had a big bottle of Pepsi.
Is it because you're like it's stuff
just
that I can't get into?
My local takeaway delivers bottles of Pepsi. That's all it was.
Just like the guy comes to your door and he brings you a single Pepsi and
a single Pepsi. He gives me a hug.
Just hold you awkwardly for maybe too long, and you're like,
"Oh,
that's Gary. That's enough." Right? Sorry, mate. I have a bad day, mate. I don't know why I'm.
Where's he from?
He's from the east, and so he goes like, I'm from East, isn't it? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm giving you a cuddle because you feel like you're a big man that needs a cuddle. So
it's beautiful.
I'm sure I need to be here for this.
This is powerful stuff. It's powerful stuff.
And
it is.
Inside the actor's studio with Troy Baker.
Jesus.
No offense intended about the wonderfully, graciously provided microphone.
I'm horrifically offended.
And hexagonal panels.
They're
really cool. They're going up on my wall. Yeah, they're really cool. I put those up on my office wall.
Yeah, there was a whole sort of delivery. It's very, very nice. Very, very.
This is the best. Okay, so Miguel Lozado, shouting out to my boy, and here's the beauty of it. When I first became friends with him, and I was like, "Hey man, what do you need from us?" He's like, "Nothing, dude. We don't need your help. They're doing fine." He's like, "Yeah, man, just use it and enjoy it, and if you like it, and tell people, but we're good." So I said, "Hey man, can you hook my peeps up with some mics?" He's like, "Sure," and then he always goes above and beyond. So like he's just a good dude. So there you go. But you didn't plug it in, so you're a dick.
Well, yeah, it just shows that he's a better person, I guess, than I am, or either of us are.
I can't wait.
You're gonna wait until you're in the new digs, right?
I've got my floor now in my office. I've got the skirting boards going in tomorrow, and then I can finally put the desk in and start actually building out the office the way I want it. So I'm excited.
Does that mean by the next recording of this show?
It'll be the one after. I'll be over there. So
Quite a
What are you
going to
change, Austin? Are you next? Like
out of this place?
Or just like period? Like look through the
when you're going to grow up.
Just in general.
When am I going to get out of this rut?
No, like the piano was that a product of
So the piano. It was.
You didn't want to go 2 feet over this way. You're like, and turn around.
I had it where my PC that has like my gaming rig and stuff was over here,
right?
And the computer is like in the desk, and the piano was against that wall. Right. And then what happened was two things, I guess three things, all kind of fed off of each other. First, new computer, which is currently basically just sitting next to the computer, and all the old equipment is just sitting here lifelessly. So it's occupying space that required moving the gaming PC over to here because the current rig is, I needed to put it somewhere. So then the piano just got kind of pushed farther away. Then in the middle of the pandemic, I did this collaboration with Tencent for their PUBG sort of it's not a remake. It's like a licensed something. I guess it's the mobile.
Is it PUBG or is it our PUBG killer kind of thing?
No, it's PUBG. It's just they had to rename it due to Chinese censorship boards, because Battleground was a sufficiently violent title. So the overlords in China change the name to Game for Peace. They asked me and Brian Tyler to do the music.
It's called Game for Peace. It's called Game for Peace.
It's literally called Game for Peace. I know. Can you even believe that
PUBG
actually
fluffy rabbits? Yeah, I get it. It's good.
Right.
But that works.
What do you do in the game?
How
you
insane.
murder.
Everyone.
Just murder everyone.
And the fact that actually works, the stupidity of that strategy actually works. Like they did it purely to evade the censors, and the fact that it works is just hilarious. So yes, but Tencent were very keen. It was actually really great process. We were able to record it all in Vienna. They were like the only orchestra that basically was operating in COVID. They had a sufficiently large studio, and we had to cap the size of the group and stuff. So we did a remote. We were gonna do it in LA. We actually had a date on the books at Fox. It would have been the first union LA game recording that I do since 2012. But they had to pull out because the LA County COVID measures were such a moving target that they were like, yeah, this could get canceled the night before, and it's non-refundable. You know, like the musicians union has a thing that if the musician takes a job and you're within a few days of the session, you're paying them regardless of what you do. Even if you reschedule it, you're still paying for that date. It's a requirement of the union. So they realized
fair, but it's from a producer standpoint, that's
highly volatile. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think it's fair in general, but situations like, oh, well, the health department made it so that literally no one's working. You're not like that would seem like a reasonable exception to waive the rule, because that musician, it's not like they're turning down another job that they could have then done. All jobs were done. Now, of course, you could then make the argument that, well, on account of all jobs being done, you know, they've just lost work too. But I would say, yeah, but it's money being spent that's yielded no return of any kind. You know, we may as well just PayPal them the money to stay at home at that point. So the producers very understandably said, let's try for Vienna, and they did a phenomenal job. And so they wanted to produce a behind the scenes video, and the guy that came over to the studio to film it was like, oh, it'd be so cool if we kind of build this little alcove where it's like your desk sort of, if you were to go up above me, it forms kind of this V where I'm like, I got my computer here and the piano behind me, and they kind of converge in that corner. And so they set up all their lighting and shot it, and it actually looked pretty cool. And then the first time we did this show, where I realized I could just lean back and do this, which I never had the luxury of before, combined with the fact that I haven't had it, because I have a couch on the other side of this that normally, you know, I would have meetings on. You've both sat on that couch. The lack of meetings for the last year and a half made me realize I don't actually care that I'm blocking the couch. This is not really a social environment anymore unless I'm talking to my screen. So I just figured to hell with it, and I left the piano there. That's the definitive Peter Jackson cut answer to your question.
No shit. That was like the Criterion answer.
It was.
Yep.
And also a lot to do for a film crew. Did I ever tell you guys,
it was such a funny thing.
Did I tell you about the time that like a film crew built like a fake apartment for me for a making of? Did I tell you about this? It was amazing.
You think green screen that shit?
No,
this is all fake.
This is all exactly. This is the illusion. Well, they wanted to shoot it in New York, and obviously I don't live in New York, so they just put
the Friends cast in the background. Like
they literally, I guess they rented an apartment, or it was like someone's friend's apartment that looked similar to this place. So similar, like, I mean, boring apartment, the exact same color walls as every other apartment internationally, right? But like they put in bookshelves, which they then went to like secondhand bookshops and found nerdy books to put on the shelves, because that was like
what project was this for?
I'm not going to say because I don't want to drop anyone in it, but it was just a weird kind of. I showed up and it was like walking into like a Truman Show version of my real apartment. I was like, this is the weirdest thing. And then they were like, at the end of the day, they were like, oh, by the way, we bought all these books just as set dressing. No one wants these nonsense kind of, because it was
this the beginning of your library?
Well, the irony was that none of the books they bought were things I'd want. So I had an option of taking all these free books that were like meant to be Mike Bithell books, and I didn't want any of them. And it was just a weird kind of thing.
So what
is in my life, no stage in my career have I ever been that important.
What's a nerdy book that you wouldn't want? You remember?
It was just it was the comic. Presumably, I think what they'd done is they'd sent a runner to like, I don't know, the local comic book store and like gone into like, because it's just set dressing, gone into like the rejects bin in the comic store. So it was like a bunch of like comics you've never heard of and like the lower rung Marvel stuff. Yeah. Like it was a lot of trash basically, and like mugs in the shape of like various superheroes' heads and stuff and all this thing. It's like,
Eesh.
I'm not nerdy
No,
enough to get
they're always
like
just
that.
like standing against that wall. Okay. So I'm either going to give an interview or get whacked. One of the two. If I ever walk into a room and there's like white linoleum, I'm like Joe Pesci and Goodfellas. I'm like, oh no. That's it for me.
If I'm ever whacked, I want it to be in a full replica of my own home. Not my own home.
And then your last thought would be like, those fucking books? Pow.
Yeah, it's a replica, but with those comics.
It was like walking into a cool guy's criticism of me as a human being. Like, it was like, what a cool guy. Like a cool guy.
And you're into this, right? You like this stuff, right?
You like this stuff? This is you, isn't it? This is how you live, right?
Yes, I like all of these things very much. Thank you.
That is excessive. I thought my elaborate behind the scenes production was over the top, but this is what you're talking about is a whole other level. They did, although I will say, here's the one way that they did beat you for this, because Brian Tyler was involved in this project of, Hollywood, Marvel acclaim and many other Fast and the Furious films and all that kind of thing.
Brother of the lead singer of Aerosmith.
They really wrong Aerosmith tie-in from the video game industry. The correct answer is Tommy Tallarico, who is in fact cousins of Steven Tyler, because Steven Tyler's birth last name is Tallarico for real. That's a name. That's a Hollywood name change, and
that explains so much about Tommy to me now.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Steven Tyler has actually come to Video Games Live shows on occasion, like before my time.
Crazy.
But yeah. Wow. But yeah, so because Tencent was obviously very keen to highlight Brian's involvement, and again, understandably, they were really disappointed when we weren't going to be recording the score in LA, where we would both be personally conducting the orchestra. And so what they decided to do, again, purely for the behind the scenes video, because this had no actual practical function, but which made for fun filmmaking, was they booked the entire Fox scoring stage that we would have been on, where you could easily fit a 105-piece orchestra. And Brian went in there and conducted alone, and then they projected the footage of him conducting to the orchestra in Vienna on a huge monitor over their shoulders, so that you like see them playing the music while he's conducting it, but he was tracked in LA. So they had to book the Fox lot at the Fox scoring stage to do that, which again,
did they show him from behind? So he was clearly in an empty room, or did they just like?
Well, the camera in Vienna was facing him, like, conductor cam. So it's the same POV, although closer than the musicians are getting. But obviously for the behind the scenes, you can clearly see it's a giant empty room, just to show like, hey, we're having fun. We're making it work. It was actually a fun idea as a way to roll with the punches. I also
found it interesting though that you said you could easily fit 105. Like, that felt like an arbitrary integer to add on to an already impressive number.
That's just the largest group that I know. That's the largest that I've been in the room with. So I know that it's at least that much.
Everything's
just a weird numbers. Like, okay, guys, no. You fifth tuba, go home. 106 is just obscene.
Well, funny enough, you do reach a point where you physically can't.
I like that he sounds like a tuba, the tuba guy.
I had to play the tuba. Well, it'd be weird if he was like, I play the tuba. Like, you're 4 foot. The instrument's larger than you are.
Hey, man, it's all possible. That's like my favorite harpist, among the many favorite harpists in London.
A little person.
Hugh Webb looks like Cast from Sons of Anarchy, and he's like the top call harpist in London. Huge handlebar mustache, and he just the harp is dwarfed by him. Like he's just this huge guy.
I'm gonna play the fuck out of this thing.
And he does. That's the funny thing. He's a fucking badass harpist. Like he's so good.
That's cool.
Wow,
And but
man.
if you just saw him on the street, you'd think he was someone's like protection, like their escort.
Like Michael Chiklis in High Fidelity, where he's the big bully, but he wrote a poem.
Yeah, basically, yes. Exactly that. I think that was the inspiration for the guy becoming a harpist.
It was.
That's where you got it from.
But yeah,
This
in
is
any case.
weird. This is weird because this is what happens when we're unsupervised. It's just
What, a lack of video game topic? Hey, we're talking about Game for Peace.
We're blowing the doors off of the lies in behind the scenes filmmaking, so that's good. That's good. We're exposing the dishonesty.
ironically to most people, I would think that they're like, Alanah's probably getting just as much microphone time as she would if she were present.
That's true.
Because it's just like, and Alanah just hurting us in a single direction. So anyway, what actually happened in the world today, I was like, but is there anything you guys had that interesting happen?
I'm trying to think. Well, it's funny because, Mike, you just prompted a thought where I'm trying to think if there was ever a behind the scenes that explicitly misled. Like, it's one thing to...
Yeah.
It's
to
one thing
stage
to...
things is fine. That's fine.
Yeah, and it's another to kind of make it seem like, I think the only one that I can think of as an example, and I'm sure I've told this story at least to Troy, but I've probably told it on this show. But I remember on the Signs DVD, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, they have a little featurette about the score, or maybe it's
Swing
they
away.
have like a they have a full documentary, I think maybe about the behind the scenes that zeroes in on the music for portion of it. No, I think it's a standalone feature. You could probably find it on YouTube. And the score of that movie is unbelievably excellent. Like James Newton Howard did such wonders for all of those movies with M. Night Shyamalan. And Signs is in many ways, it's a tie, I think, between Signs and The Village of which has the best score, because they're both both up there.
Tie between.
Yeah.
We're all waiting.
We're on the edge of our seats. We've lost Austin, which is great because he's recording. Oh, there he is.
Oh,
You back?
yeah, it's weird. You both froze for a second. Now
That's
it
funny.
says
From
your
our
internet
perspective,
connection
you
is unstable.
froze.
This is some
How
this
very
is some
peculiar.
M. Night Shyamalan.
So wait, it's a tie between what? This
The
is where
Village
we
and
lost you.
Signs, in terms of best score for an M. Night Shyamalan film, I would say personally. And so Signs, they recorded it all at Todd A.O., studio that no longer exists, a huge orchestra. And there's this footage of them recording. And James is not a conductor, so he's in the booth. Pete Anthony's, who's orchestrator, also conducting. And M. Night is sitting with him at the console. And he goes, they did like a take, and it had some issues, as happens sometimes, especially complicated horror sci-fi music. And so James says, like, oh no, they'll get it. It'll be fine. We'll just take it again. And Shyamalan goes, they just need to give it 10% more love. And he's like, well, they really just need to read it again. Like, it's not that there's something written. Shyamalan's like, just tell him 10% more love. And he's like, I promise, just let him play it again. It'll be fine. It's like trying to run the session and not let it be derailed, basically. And they keep coming back to this moment. And the way it's cut, it looks like, oh, the camaraderie, director, composer, and so like it's kind of like they use this whole 10% more love thing as a recurring motif. They keep cutting back to that, and then they'll cut to like talking head B-roll where he's describing, oh, here's how I think about music in my movie and blah 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 blah. And so it's like a whole featurette about scoring, but they'll keep going back to this one moment during the sessions, and then the very last bit, the kind of button on the end of the featurette, is him going, Shyamalan almost frustrated going, if you just said 10% more love, it would solve all this. And so James picks up the little talkback remote control so that the orchestra can hear him. And he just goes, the note is 10% more love. And he has this face like, fucking God. And M. Night is like, ha ha! I love it. And if you've never watched anything about recording, you would look at that and smile and laugh, and because you're getting the M. Night Shyamalan perspective so well captured. But if you know anything about music and you look at James's face, it's like, my God, get me out of this. It's so funny, his agony, where it really is, it is portraying a moment the exact opposite of the way it's being felt by the people there. And
You know, I want.
what's your I Want song?
I really am. This has been my struggle lately. Is that and I think you and I talked about this, Austin. But I had a tendency to make a blanket indictment of someone's character that forever branded them.
I think that's the whole.
That's everyone, right?
That's the whole notion of first impressions. Yeah. I think that is
Sure, but
normal.
this may not even be a first impression. This could be. I just thought this person was this way, and then I would try to rope people into. I mean, they're an asshole, right?
Right, like getting that agreement, that consensus on it.
Yeah, which is completely probably unfounded. It's uninformed, and I just
Very high school, right? As well, like it's very kind
for
of
sure. But what I want to do is I want to get to the place where it's like, I don't know. I haven't seen them today. Today could be the day that they decided to turn it all around. Today could be the day that they woke up and went, man, I'm an asshole. And I don't want to be caught on that day being wrong. I would much rather go, I don't know. They were an asshole that day. But we were talking about this today. My in-laws were in town, and we were talking about, bad celebrity interactions. And I had one once at an airport, and I had just gotten off a bad phone call and gotten some bad news, and there were people that maybe at the airport that were wanting autographs, and I just lit this guy up, and it was not good, and it was not a good moment for me, and I went back through the airport. I found him. I was like, hey man, I'm really sorry. Like, you caught me at a bad moment, and I wish I hadn't done that. I say all that as a setup to, I want to believe that M. Night Shyamalan is actually a good dude and that he's a good director. But man, every story I hear just proves that he's not. And I don't know if that's my interpretation of it. I don't know if people are like, man, you just don't know. And I don't want to be that person like, he's an asshole. He's actually the most kind, generous, caring person. But just I look at that regardless of if it's, giving a note to the conductor, to the orchestra, to the actors, to your DP, to craft services, it doesn't matter. 10% more love is just the most selfish form of directing I could possibly think of. It's non-actionable. You can't, what does that mean to you? 10%
especially
more love.
It also implies a lack of effort up to that point, right? It implies that the professional you're working with hasn't been working hard on it. Yeah.
You've only been giving 90%. I'm like, fuck you, dude. Like, Austin, I think about what you say about horns, about how horns will hold back, brass will hold back because they physically, their embouchure will, is that correct to say that the embouchure will fail them after a certain point? So they're like, we're going to figure this out.
The
and
muscles
then when tape
just
is
become
rolling,
fatigued. Like the sheer amount of air pressure you have to maintain on your lips to hold a seal and to be able to direct the airflow and hold a good, keep the pitch in tune, good intonation, is so exhausting after a while that if they are asked to just relentlessly blast fortissimos at some point, they're going to fall apart.
So it's like you get one of these. It's like the big, the big screaming, note or whatever. It's like in every session, like Mike, you've done this really goes like, hey, we got some yelling. Let's do that towards the end. Because like the dialogue is really where we need to kind of find the subtlety and the nuance. Everything else is just like scream as if you're on fire,
Right.
And there's no way to do that. And there's some people that try to train you and go, well, you can use your diaphragm. And if you open up your throat, it's like all that stuff is great. But at the end of the day, you are still forcing air out of your throat at a high volume, high decibel rate, and it's gonna tear you up. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Unless you're Frank Welker or Fred Tatasciore or D. Bradley Baker. So I look at that and I go, it's just 10% more love. I'd be like, how about you give 10% more effort and actually come up with an actionable note? Because I'm assuming that those musicians they're showing up there. They don't want their performance to be bad. So if there's a good note to be had, give me the good note, but don't
and
tell
especially,
me.
again, it's a selectively cut thing, but in the context of you hear James say that was just a reading take. Like they just need another take. Like there's nothing systemically wrong with their performance. There isn't like a typo in the sheet music. Exactly. Like people forget when you're accustomed to routinely being in the studio with these top tier musicians, you forget the inherent wizardry of what they're doing. They are taking a piece of music that has never been in front of them before, and they're playing it as if they've been practicing it for months. They are.
It's insane.
And so the fact that it's anything short of perfection in the first take is a thing that should be. It's like the Louis C.K. I'm in a chair in the sky. Like it should be a thing that completely dumbfounds everyone all the time, forever. Even if you're John Williams and you've stood in front of those people hundreds of times, it's still just an astonishing feat that it's even possible to do. Especially you listen to the score to Signs, and it is not humdrum, musically kind of pedestrian. No, it's freaking involved, and the orchestra has real shit to do, and so people are learning and playing with expression and emotion and sensitivity. They're shaping it straight out of the gate in the first try. It is an astonishing thing that really not a lot of musicians in the world can do. In LA and London, being two of the hubs of some of the most talented people at this in the world. And so
I wonder what that looks like to someone like M. Night Shyamalan, who if you're like, that was basically their first draft, and he's like, well, that's what I shoot. So I don't know how much iteration he gives to his movies. And again, this sounds
he definitely does loads. Like he definitely
does he?
Those films are very structurally thought through, I think. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every movie he does is excellent, but it seems like I don't think you could accuse him of not putting thought into it. Like it seems they all feel like films that have been through several drafts to me. And
I think
it doesn't have that laziness to it. They're often misguided. Like one of my genuinely, unironically, one of my favorite films is The Happening,
Village,
just because it's so misguided, but so aggressive in its intent. It's a bad idea executed with absolute passion, and that makes it fascinating to me.
Well, he even says on the documentary, is like, I wanted to make an R-rated movie. That was the whole reason why I did this. I wanted to make an R-rated, so we went for it. Whatever would give us an R rating, we did it. I'm like,
yeah, that's very odd. That reminds
but that's not laziness to me. That's something else. That's misguided.
It is misguided. I think that's a better characterization.
Yeah.
I think what all those have in common, my Monday morning, I've never met him. I've never been around him. I totally am with you, Troy. Like, I want all of the assumptions that this starts to add up to about him to turn out to be this mischaracterization that, he's been victim to, his own sort of bad press or whatever. I would love for that to be true, but it does seem to me from a sort of Monday morning quarterback kind of perspective that he's not being told no by people, or at least in the prior. Now his movies are all kind of low budget, and apparently they're kind of getting good again. Although I haven't seen.
He self-funds now, I think, in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
What's his latest movie? I don't even know.
Well, he did
Old just came out.
Yeah, that one
ago,
that's brand new.
Yet.
I haven't seen. I don't know anything about
it.
He
did Split.
But people said Split. I did not see, but people said Split was actually quite a return to form for him.
It's fun. It's fun. McAvoy's having a good time in it. Like you can definitely. I wouldn't say it's excellent, but it's good. It's a good B movie. What
was that movie with James McAvoy before he really popped, where it essentially was all taking place in the second that someone died, and he lived out this entire life?
I don't remember that one.
I mean, that sounds like
McAvoy's interesting because
it's basically the plot of Jacob's Ladder.
Sure,
McAvoy's been
from
around
30 years before.
McAvoy's one of those actors who was on British TV for decades before when do Americans first when does McAvoy hit in America? Is it? It's not X-Men, is it? It's before that, isn't it?
Wasn't he in?
Oh, he's
Inception?
like Tumnus in.
Yeah. Probably Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah,
would be the first thing, or I think it's also possible. Band of Brothers.
Is he in Band of Brothers?
He is in the. He's like. Oh, if you
everybody
go
was in
back,
Band of
it's
Brothers.
every British actor who could put on an army uniform, because it was all shot in the UK. So if you go back to Band of Brothers now, oh yeah, everyone in that. If you watch Band of Brothers now, off to the side is what's his name No, Tom Hiddleston's not in that one. He's in one called Conspiracy, which is similarly small, kind of World War II.
Oh, you mean
World War TV show?
You mean
what?
Fassbender?
I might be thinking. Oh yeah, Michael Fassbender was in it.
He's in
Super
it.
skinny.
Oh god, Venom. Why am I forgetting his name? That's such an
Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy's in it.
It's funny because a lot of that cast are good friends of mine because they all became like working actors, and they basically a bunch of low budget films that they were shifting. As they all started to hit their 40s, they started shifting into more writing and producing, and I got hooked in with one of those guys, and then he kind of passed me around the group. And
I remember,
you
told me about this. Yeah.
That cast, like that group of guys, are some of the nicest, most, they're the perfect antidote to the cliche. Hollywood is full of a bunch of bullshit, like, bunch of bullshitters who will just say whatever and never be genuine with you. And to the last person of everyone I've interacted with who was associated with Band of Brothers, that couldn't possibly be farther from the truth. Like, these are people deeply committed to their craft. They're people that are extremely grateful for the opportunity, because for pretty much all of them, it launched their careers.
It's sort of been that's got to have been a hard shoot as well. You'd have to be a certain kind of person to do well in that kind of.
They were all young.
So I imagine they did
had
it fast and out in the cold, right? Like it would. That must be a ridiculous project to work on.
And considering
especially early on.
And considering that it's about a bunch of World War II, draftees. These would all be people, in their early 20s, give or take, and so they're not that experienced, also by and large, and but every one of them speaks with immense amounts of reverence and love about Spielberg and Tom Hanks and just and for years, the best part is that most of these guys, they're all portraying real people. Like Band of Brothers is a true story, and for years, for the veterans who were still alive. I think they're all gone now. Maybe one or two is like pushing 100, but for years they did events like World War II, or Normandy Beach anniversary kind of commemorations and those sorts of things, where they would go and tour around with the guy they portrayed. And so they all developed these really special friendships with these, 70, 80, 90-year-old World War II, like literal paratrooping veterans who lived through this stuff. And they all think that was like one of the greatest privileges that supersedes anything that they could ever achieve as an actor, to be able to bond with these guys that by any metric you could imagine are like actual heroes. And
you'd walk past in the street if you saw them, right? Like you don't know. The book's fascinating, actually. If anyone listening wants to pick up the Band of Brothers, the Band of Brothers, I think the version I read was called Band of Brothers. I don't know if it was originally called that.
Do you not have that book behind you?
I don't. Half my bookcase is gone now. So
I see that.
It does look like in a state of disarray.
It's diminishing.
It's working its way across because we've got like our downstairs. We've just got like rows of bookshelves because I have too many books. So we're transferring.
No, you have just the right amount. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
There's a funny story. A friend of mine was one of the mixers at Remote Control with Hans Zimmer, and when they were doing the Pacific, they were doing a listen back, and it was Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Hans Zimmer, and Satoshi, who's the mixer, there in the room, and they're all just sitting there listening.
I knew that you knew Satoshi. How have we never talked about that?
Do you know Satoshi?
I mean, I've met him. I've never worked with him.
Me and the Satoshi, we go way back. Yeah,
dude, that guy's a wicked engineer and mixer. But Tom Hanks is just kind of sitting back, and in his droll, beautiful humor, and I think a lot of people sometimes forget that he's one of the funniest people, man.
Oh, so funny, yeah.
He just sits back, and it's just everyone's just kind of waiting for them to load up the new session or whatever, and Tom Hanks just goes, I just want to point out the irony that we're watching a World War II show with a German, a Jew, an American, and a Japanese person. He was like, this is the apex of harmony. This is what we can achieve.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
That's a good point.
I find it so fascinating that three of the most powerful economies and strongest like trade partners and general alliances in the world today are the US, Germany, and Japan. Like, what a fascinating piece of historical perspective that is.
Money can bring us together, Mike. You see that?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Capitalism works. That's what I've always said. That's what I've always said on the show.
Well, trade, it's the age old lesson that trade is a hell of a lot more effective than bombs.
Damn straight.
And did you see on the tangentially related to Japan? Did you see that the opening Olympics ceremony used a bunch of JRPG music
that's cool.
as their music? I saw all my Twitter feed exploding that like the Tokyo Olympics opened with music from like Chrono Trigger and various Final Fantasy. It was there were some legitimate deep cuts in there. And
that's one of their largest kind of cultural exports, right? Like it's like Mr. Bean being in the not Mr. Bean, knockoff Mr. Bean being in the Olympics. Technically, that wasn't Mr. Bean in the British Olympics opening ceremony because of an IP ownership issue. No, it was Rowan Atkinson playing a Mr. Bean-like character.
Playing Mr.
They couldn't get the
Espresso.
rights to Mr. Bean. Yeah, exactly.
Legume. He just lentil.
That guy is so talented, man. His scene in Love Actually, where he's preparing the thing for Alan Rickman, is like a short film of perfection. It's just
and also just playing opposite Alan Rickman.
Yeah, Blackadder made it over to you guys
all day long.
Yeah,
I grew up, dude, on like the worst era of your television. So it was like, Are You Being Served? Faulty Towers, To the Manor Born,
the
Blackadder.
Worst era. That stuff's great.
It is great.
Stuff that's aged well. Some of it's not aged particularly well, but the good stuff has.
That's like what people were like, dude, are you watching Doctor Who? I'm like, no, because I grew up on like the original. All right, mate, we got about £50 to make this whole show. So what are we going to do? That was never Doctor
Gary
Who.
was involved in the production of Doctor Who.
Most people don't know that, but he's got no knuckles. He can't even be. He's like sausages, so he just flaps his. He don't have no knuckles though, so he just pulls.
Yeah, his two jobs were making Doctor Who and delivering Pepsi. That's all he does.
I loved you, by the way. You were brilliant. Thank you so much. It was a long time ago, but I'm not doing it anymore. Yeah. I don't do the telly anymore. Not since the incident.
The funny thing is that's not wildly unrealistic. The song Mr. Postman, the kind of 50s classic.
Yeah.
That was written by a postman who's the record label that I don't remember which, he kind of wrote that song and sort of dropped it off in the mail as part of his route. And the way I learned that story is that one time I had to get some, my internet went down and they had to come do some physical stuff on the wall, like in the cabling, and the AT&T or whoever sent a guy, and that postman, author of Mr. Postman, was this AT&T guy's father. So we sat here for an hour. I was like, do you want a coffee? And like, let's just talk. And like, he sat there.
He was the son of the guy who wrote it, not he was the
son
father.
of it.
Like,
Yeah,
I've been doing this.
I've been working this.
How old are you? 97. I wish I could retire.
Yeah, I think that would have been a cautionary tale in royalty negotiations if that
You'd
had
have been like
case.
the guys with the Band of Brothers guys. It would be an opportunity for you to learn from the old.
Do you remember this battle?
Yeah, happily not. No, but
would you like to relive the worst moments of your life?
I realized the reason I brought up the Japan, I forgot my own reason for bringing it up. The Tokyo opening ceremony was I remember I was watching it, and as is predictable, I guess, the Olympics tend to be a spare no expense moment for the exhibiting country. And I'm watching this, and they're using a bunch of JRPG music, including just playing back the originals, like with the fake orchestra. And I was like, well, now that's very odd. So I messaged a few friends and I said, why would they do that? They have, like they've got the Tokyo Philharmonic, they've got no shortage of talented musicians, and there's composers, everybody's local, like broadly speaking, like what the hell? It seems bizarre. Like it's very, and it would go back and forth where some of it was live and some of it wasn't. And what I found out was that apparently it was all put together very last second because they had hired a Japanese composer to write an original piece, which is typically what happens. Because everyone was going, "Oh, this is so cool! Japan is, honoring its its contribution to the world. Because I mean, JRPG is basically a category. It's a genre of music at this point. I mean, it's like saying, you know, the Morricone spaghetti western or something. Yeah, like it's a set of musical parameters that have literally been defined that you can adhere to or not. And it was all put together last second because someone said, oh, you know, apparently the original composer they'd hired was sort of found out to be, you know, pretty terrible or something, like old bad tweets or something like that. And I just thought, you know, that can dethrone you from the Olympics? Like, Jesus Christ. And I went and looked, and then it turns out, yeah, this guy was actually...
You were like, this is cancel culture gone bad. Then you looked, you were like, yeah, no, fair play.
There's this guy, no, like this guy, they said he had basically insufficiently apologized for being a bully as a kid. And that made me think, I said, every fucking kid is a bully or bullied as a kid. Like, I'm sorry, but that seems like to decades later get you kicked off the Olympics seems extreme. But then you read about what he did as a kid and you're like, I think this is where the right to free association does kick into play. Because he apparently...
Like, he was like Eric Cartman.
No, for real.
Like, Biff Tannen.
He was quite... No, Cartman is actually a really good example because apparently there was one kid who he psychologically tortured to the extent of making him eat his own shit. Like full-on psychopathic behavior. And put out a statement like decades later that said, if I knew who that was or where he was, I promise I would apologize, but I don't know where he lives or something like that. And then just went on about his life. So I was reading that and I was like, well, okay, I guess I may be a little bit on the side of the Olympics committee on this one. Because
Scott Tinnerman, by the way, that was
that's exactly what I thought of. It struck me as I couldn't believe the extent of the vile behavior, and was like, well, you know, because I do think that if someone does something profoundly stupid or even criminal as a kid, you want to live in a world where people are able to rehabilitate. And the idea that a decision made as a 14-year-old, I want to live in a world where, you know, you are not damning the next 60 years because of things that you did when you're not even legally allowed to, you know, make your own decisions. Like you know, there are always, you know, extenuating circumstances.
But yeah,
there are lines, exactly. You know, but most people are awful as kids due to environmental concerns. Like they've got, you know, like a lot of the worst bullies have terrible parents, you know, very abusive, domestic, and like there's a lot of reasons where it's like if someone does something fucking like, oh, perfect. Okay, here's my example that is hopefully not going to sound self-aggrandizing, but like I got the absolute shit kicked out of me when I was in the 7th grade by a kid. He broke the bone called the orbit below your eye in 4 places, cracked open my sinus, gave me a concussion. I fully blacked out from the experience. Like it was a severe assault. Like I literally had to go to the hospital. My eye swelled shut, couldn't see out this eye for several days. It was a full, and I had real issues with confrontation for years where I would get instant heart palpitations if someone even raised their voice at me until basically college before that finally started to go away.
You got like PTSD at that point, right? Like
I mean, presumably something akin to that, but some 13-year-old version, or my version, I guess I would say, because I do think it's possible to happen at 13. I shouldn't qualify it, but point being, that kid went to juvie for that. And like he was expelled from school and went and had to do a weekend in juvie. And if he talked to me or asked his friends to talk to me for like 5 years, he went back automatically for like 3 months or something. It's like, it was a severe sentence, but I don't want to live in a world.
Hold on. As you understand it, was that a, oops, I got away, or was he as you understand it, was he willfully trying to do that level of damage to you? Or was it, I've known fights where people are like, you always saw in the movie someone break a bottle over someone's head and it ended up killing the guy. And so, I mean, there's things where people are like, I never intended to do that. It just, this got away from me, or
100% intentional. No, this kid, we were, so this is the stupidity of it. We were in the lunch line in the cafeteria in plain view of the entire fucking school. And
Austin turns to the guy, he says, that was Hans Zimmer. And the guy's like...
Well, I was, you know, the nerdy, scrawny kid, you know, and
oddly enough, punch.
He basically, the thing I'll never forget, because I was so like, logical, and I was fucking, my heroes at that age were like fucking Data and Spock, and so he wanted to cut ahead of me in line, in the fucking lunch line, but there were only like 3 more people to the front. We were basically out of there. So I was like, basically, no, fuck off. That's ridiculous. Like, is the next 40 seconds of your time that on the line? And he grabbed my hair and pushed me down and punched me close to 30 times in the face. I blacked out instantly. I mean, it was a full concussion immediately. So, I mean, he had to be dragged off by staff. There was no crime of passion or something. I mean, the kid probably had fucking shitty parents who beat the fuck out of him. I have no idea, but like he had massive amounts of unconstrained rage, and I just was the random pedestrian who stepped in front of the bull in that moment, said the wrong thing, and it set him off. But reason I bring all this up is because I don't want to live in a world where his entire future was completely fucked forever because of what he did to me that day. Like, I don't ever want to see him again or interact with him. Like
You hope that he gets rehabilitated and found.
My hope was that he found his way into a life that doesn't cause him to do shit like that, and that like if he applies for a job and somebody looks at that, they go, oh well, 20 years ago we saw you beat up some kid in middle school, no thanks, we don't take your kindly around it. Like at some point I hope someone gives him a chance and that he actually makes it worthwhile. That's the whole point. That was the thing that pinged for me when I saw this Olympics thing, where I thought,
sure,
now what that guy did was, like I got a rather severe version of bullying, but it is still fundamentally like some kids are bullies and some kids are stronger than others, and this kid happened to be pretty damn strong. I don't want it to ruin his life, even though it was pretty horrible.
That would have to be the result. The level that you're talking about of rehabilitation is a process. So that is someone who said something, did something, wore something, went to something, whatever it was, but they're just like, I don't know, I'm not a person yet, and I'm figuring all of this stuff out. And for a moment in my brief history on this planet, I thought that I could align myself with X. And then you realize through a process, that's not anything that I want to be affiliated with. I don't understand how these people, whatever it is that brings you through that process of going, no longer do I want to be associated with this widely considered salacious thing. There has to be other evidence. It's the people that go, you're pissed about that? Those are the people that haven't done the work. It's the people that go, my perfect example is Ad Rock from Beastie Boys. When someone on the line goes, you're sitting here, petitioning for women's rights, and you're the guy who wrote All I Want Is Girls. And he goes like, look, I'd rather be a hypocrite than a bigot. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's it. I would rather contradict my former self blatantly and openly than to continue to be the same person that I was at 18, 19,
I actually,
35, 40.
To me, it telegraphs a good thing if somebody is being a hypocrite at some point. Like when we see like in presidential debates and stuff, and people, there's always this obsession with
Look what they said 18 years ago.
I have always believed this. I am rock steady. There's always a price paid on changing one's mind on an issue. And there's a certain amount of defeatism in political terms to say, well, I evolved on the subject. And it's like, and people think they've caught you in an old belief, and it's like, lest we remind, when Obama took office, he was openly opposed to gay marriage, for example. Like that was just not even 15 years ago, and like widely one of the most revered among the left, one of the most revered recent political figures. But like he wouldn't pass, that test by today's standards if we were to sort of take everyone back in time to 2008. And so like the idea that there can't be growth and can't be reevaluation and saying, I was wrong about that. I to me, rock steady, lifelong consistency is a sign of intellectual laziness in most cases, because it means you've never questioned your biases. You've never questioned your assumptions. You've always assumed everything that I learned from 0 to 18 or 0 to 12 is apparently everything I need to know about the world. And
how I will be forever. The concrete
no
set.
new information could possibly upend that. I mean, it's like, that's how outrageous.
we're all old enough that we've witnessed enormous cultural change just in our lifetimes, right? Like how
God, I hope so. Yeah.
various, like in terms of social justice issues, like it's already we're at that age, and you do get to decide when stuff's happening. Of do you want to move with the times and change and learn, or do you want to be the person complaining about young people nowadays? Those are the two options basically, and it's kind of like.
Well, I think there's. I don't know that I would boil it down to just those two, because cultures.
There's always more nuance in Venice.
Well, but plus cultures can be wrong. Like if you're a German in 1938 looking around at this populist movement, you could be going, I'm a.
You better change with the times.
Change with the times.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the thing.
So we hate these people now. We hate these people now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean
that is an incredibly good rebuke of what I just said.
But I will say, here's a great qualifier. If the movement is towards hate and exclusion, that's typically and historically a bad movement.
We don't tend to celebrate the people who are trying to withhold rights from people in
right,
history.
Or in any way disenfranchise.
No,
but
exactly.
where
true,
trends go love and inclusion, that's probably the rail that you want to be on.
Yeah,
it's true.
So that
but
goes,
I think
by the way,
those,
for any argument. I hate these people. It's like, yo, you're on the wrong side of this, man. Because you can never, ever, 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 ever out-hate someone.
But it's
ever.
never that. That's the thing. It's not you need to hate these people in such... It's that, but in veiled terms. It's all your life's problems are being caused by these people. And if you're someone who genuinely has problems, that's a seductive argument, Mm-hmm. Germany post-World War I was an economic catastrophe. It was an easily co-opted situation of, all you people... There's actually someone to blame for this. And if you're sitting there with those, these famous photos of people taking wheelbarrows full of cash to burn because it's more valuable as fuel than it is as money, then, if somebody says, I happen to know the solution, 10% more love, then
full circle. It's beautiful.
Bam!
I do think that is a seductive thing. That's why I think that we're at a very challenging and difficult moment in American politics right now, because I as someone who has family and friends across the political spectrum, the problem is the Venn diagrams get really difficult because yes, of course, there's no defense of Trump. But there are a lot of people that were sold his kind of populist, protectionist agenda that I don't believe are bigots and racist. And I think that the conflation of Trump supporter equals bigot and racist, I think that there's a lot of factory workers. Look, this is why Andrew Yang was, to me, was a very a compelling potential guy to win those people across party lines, because he was saying, I get you. I see your problem. All you, millions of truckers looking at self-driving cars and going, I got a real problem on my hands. Like my job is very soon going to be fully automated out of existence. And those are a lot of folks that felt spoken to by Trump, for better or worse. I think that there's probably plenty of bigoted assholes who, were all too happy to go along. And I would never deny that. But I think it's when we oversimplify it, it's to our own peril, because again, a lot of these things looked like that in the 30s too.
If you were, supported that fella, you were doing so either because you agreed with what he was saying or because you were willfully ignoring what he was saying. There wasn't
I had no idea he was into those things.
Oh no, no one was shocked by any of that stuff. So it's kind of
I think that willfully ignoring is an absolutely true thing. There's a lot of people that hated him and voted for him. They voted for him begrudgingly. You can hold people responsible
for that.
But they felt
and you can
like
criticize them for that action.
Well, but I did not vote this way, but I can empathize with that position, because I think they're saying, here's a guy who's going to try, what he says is he's trying to fight to keep my job, and he's got, the good old homeland folks in mind, and I wouldn't introduce my daughter to this fucking asshole. Like you saw, there's a lot of Republicans that felt that way about him.
What's the Blazing Saddles quote? Good, honest, hardworking people. idiots.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt bad for a lot of those folks, because I thought they felt like they had to vote for an option that they hated. And the sad thing was, obviously, it's a con job. He didn't give a shit about Trump. Served only himself. So, I felt those people were fleeced, but I do empathize with them having been victims of a con job.
I can empathize with the source of it. I can criticize them for being so easily conned, though, for sure. Like it's
isn't that blaming the victim of a sort? I mean, if someone is
they weren't the victim of his policies, they weren't the victim of his.
But the victim of a con. I'm talking about the first election. It becomes a very different matter in his re-election, and he lost.
Sure.
So, yeah. But I do think that his first election, he's, to most people, he's that guy from The Apprentice. Like they just don't follow this stuff. They don't follow his Twitter. They don't follow.
I think you are right to say that most of the blame lies with the liar rather than the lied to. I think that's fair.
That's
but I think
fundamentally all I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I think some of the blame goes to the person being lied to as well. We're responsible for our actions, even if they're.
I think it's kind of like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me kind of a thing. Like, I think I just don't see how you could possibly ever blame somebody who's been lied to for having been tricked. But once it's demonstrated and they don't care, we're in a different situation fundamentally.
Yeah, I guess I'm on the slightly. Yeah, I guess I agree with you in the broad strokes, but I do think I think we're all responsible for all our actions, even if we take them stupidly. Like, I think even if you do something,
I certainly don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
so there is still responsibility there. That would be my. Wow, this got in an interesting place.
If there is an opportunity for authorship or agency into a thing, and someone says, here are the keys to this car. Now, we want you to know that the steering is out of alignment, the brakes are a little dodgy, the carburetor is about to explode, and there's no gas. If I go, okay, and I get into the car, and either the car falls apart, I hit another person, it stops working, I can't get out and blame the car. I willfully, knowledgeably looked at that. Or if no one told me anything about the car, I am still responsible when someone hands me the keys to go, I need to know certain things about this car. Is it in working condition? It is on to me because I am making the active choice to operate something that can give me transportation, that can grant me the needs that I have, or the desires at least, or it could also potentially harm somebody else. I think have as a society, that responsibility.
We need to become more comfortable with criticism, just generally
in
our personal lives.
Could not agree more with that.
Broader culture. Like I think it's absolutely okay to hold someone accountable or criticize them. And I think we too quickly jump to the idea that criticizing someone is punishing someone or attacking someone.
Or that it is, like just Austin said, it's damning for the rest of your life. Or that it's nothing
which it
more
often
than
isn't,
just an opinion.
To be clear.
It's
like,
not.
It's
hopefully.
If you even the example of the I don't know the case, so I don't know the specifics of this, but the thing you said about the composer at the Olympics, like that guy's still working, he still has a life, he just was that one opportunity for the best job in the world was unavailable to him because he was a bit of an arsehole once, or a lot of an arsehole. I
was going to say, or a sort of psychopath.
Right.
I have no idea the guy you're talking about.
My point is there's a gradation, right? Like that guy's life has not been ruined by something he did as a kid, it's been influenced. And there's a difference. I think we jump very quickly to the binary thing of this person's being criticized publicly, therefore their life is over, they've been cancelled, this is the worst crime that can be committed against another human being. And that's a big jump. Whereas actually I think being criticized is a absolutely fine thing that sucks in the moment.
And that there are consequences. Like when I mentioned the kid, my childhood bully, for example, like if he applied to 10 jobs and 3 of them said, you've got like jail time on your record, and like we're not comfortable hiring you. Sorry. Like I do believe that's within their right to, like they shouldn't be forced. But I hope that of those 10, not all came to that conclusion. That's exactly my point.
Yeah. And that's what we generally see with people who are quote unquote cancelled, or people who, like they still have, they can still get jobs. Like they can still go on with their lives.
There's always an opportunity to turn it around.
Yeah, and I think that we as a society, this is something we're processing because, to be fair, this is the first time in human history where global accountability is actually a thing we have to deal with, right? So of course it's going to be a weird challenge, and we're not going to get all the rules of that right immediately.
I think the issue I have is interesting. It's actually, these two threads actually connect in that way. Insofar as, I think, Troy, the point you were making about the car with regard to like a Trump voter is that they did insufficient due diligence. They basically didn't ask questions about the car, and then they took it. I think that's a perfectly valid argument. Like,
but there were not. Hold on. I also want to be clear. It wasn't like, here's the car. Whatever you want to figure out is there. The car was blatantly advertising all of its flaws, blatantly, widely.
There was smoke coming out of the car as he approached it.
I think that is a perfectly valid criticism of like the uninformed or the kind of failure to engage in due diligence as a voter. I also think it's a reality that most people don't. They just don't do that. And also when people are acting out of fear, they make, uninformed decisions, or they make decisions they probably otherwise wouldn't defend.
So I guess I'm this. And that was a huge problem. It's like,
I think
you are either one of these two things. You're either the worst person to me for this reason, or you're the worst person to me for this reason. And that is the problem. The main issue that this world has right now, speaking of global accountability, is you do have this rise of global accountability, plus you have zero discourse. And that the only way that those two things are rectified is through discourse.
That's where I was sort of going with that too, is that, I think your point is well made on the car, even though I do empathize with people who are acting out of fear because they are afraid. Like, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that, like, just because every neuroscientist on the planet can explain to you that is not, your rational faculties are fully not working. If you are in total fear, you just want to alleviate your fear. So if you're voting based on fear, you're not making a rational decision. And that's how you get, a candidate and then a president like that. And I empathize with it, even if I think it's fucking tragic. But
that's a good qualifier too, is criticism must be administered with empathy, not devoid of it.
Well, and it's also the question of what's the point of the criticism? Is it to make someone better or to make them worse? That's the problem I have with the global accountability thing we've got going on, is that Twitter is so easily a situation where no context whatsoever can lead to a situation where you have somebody who's rarely interacts with more than 20 people on a day-to-day basis suddenly has tens of thousands of people calling them the worst thing ever. And I'm like,
that's not criticism. That's condemnation.
We're not equipped to deal with that. Like, it's one, even if they said the worst thing ever, they can have potentially thousands of people taking them task for it, when 5 seconds earlier it was like them and 5 friends are interacting online or whatever. And to me, it's a volatile environment that I think, it does not encourage discourse. It does definitely encourage yelling. Which is a shame, because I do think that the way that it interconnects people is, broadly speaking, unbelievably incredible. I mean, the number of people that I've met because of these tools that I would not have in a prior chapter of human history is it's probably the majority of people that I think it's true for both of you and Alanah. Like, the pre-internet, I don't know how we would have met, so
True
it's
story.
like,
Gary would have introduced us.
I thought you said Carrie, and I was like, now that's a curious hypothesis. True, fair point. So yeah, it's one of those that I feel like my biggest takeaway of all this is that I feel like we're in this like awkward teenage transition state as a civilization right now, where it's like when a kid goes through a growth spurt and like don't know how to really use their legs because they're suddenly like 6 inches taller than they were a few months ago, and they just are awkward. Like, everyone has known or was that lanky kid that
Preach.
just, and I was too.
Am.
Like, and like, I feel like that's kind of where we are right now, where we fling about and we accidentally knock over a giant China case and it destroys everything, and we're like, oh fuck, because we're still this technology. Like, there's a great quote from Einstein. He was referring to nuclear power, but he says, our chief problem is a perfection of means, but a confusion of aims. We're basically, we're we don't have clarity and wisdom with which to use world-endingly powerful technology.
Do you know what I like? There's oh god, what's his name? I'm gonna have to look out. I think there's a guy called Rowan Coleman. Here we go. Jesus Christ. Jesus H. Christ.
Most people don't know that.
The what was I gonna say? There's a guy called, I think, Rowan Coleman, who's a YouTuber who makes like Star Trek videos, and I love Star Trek, obviously. And I thought he said something very profound about Star Trek that I found really interesting as a way of reappraising Star Trek, which is jumping off what you're saying, which is Star Trek is one of the only sci-fi universes that optimistically assumes that humanity's ethics and morality will evolve at the same pace as their technology. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that kind of sets it apart and is interesting, is the idea that we move on as a culture and we learn all this new technology, but that we also evolve as a species at the same pace and are able to do that in a positive way. Most sci-fi assumes that, you know, we're basically going to be the same in 200 years,
like The
but we'll have cool
Expanse.
spaceships.
Have you watched The Expanse? Like it's.
I need to get to it. I've tried to watch that pilot a couple of times, and I've been told you have to push past the pilot. That's people always say that to me. I will get to it.
I think it's perfection. I think it's so goddamn excellent.
I will get to it.
And it is exactly as you say it. It is humans behaving incredibly realistically. Because I think that's where Star Trek, I love the optimism of Star Trek, but I think it's optimism to the point of unrealism. Like the human beings today are fundamentally the same instincts. We're driven by the same primal urges and all that kind of stuff as the humans of the Renaissance. And that's the Captain Picard is closer to us today than Leonardo da Vinci is to us today, like by a measure of time. Like, I don't think that, now you said kept pace with the evolution of technology, which I suppose would imply an exponential curve, but.
And that's what makes it fantastical, right? Because that's not what's happened historically.
I think biologically that's probably impossible unless we just cease to be human.
I meant evolve in the ethics and morality sphere, not the physiological one. But yes, I take your point.
But they're the same
100%,
thing.
yeah.
They're the same thing. Our brains are wired for survival on the savannas of Africa, and the fact that humanity migrated out of Africa and built things all over the planet, built societies, cultivated thousands of languages and religions, and we're not programmed in a core way to do all that. It's astonishing. I mean, as modern physicists are fond of pointing out, the fact that we can even begin to comprehend something as unintuitive as quantum mechanics when it has no analog in our lived day-to-day experience is truly an insane statement about the capacity of the human brain, because it has zero evolutionary benefit whatsoever.
Or music, right?
Music, actually, I'm not so sure that's the case, because music most certainly predates language.
For sure. But it's still a completely human invention, right? It doesn't. Music requires.
No, I don't agree with that either.
I would say
like birdsong and things. Would you argue?
Well, it depends on how you define music. You know, most modern definitions would say something along the lines of music is simply organized sound, and
right. But that requires an organizer.
But almost every animal that vocalizes is doing that.
That's a really interesting point. I've not thought of that.
Would you say that like a painting?
I'm underestimating birds, I think.
I mean, there's a lot of complexity, and there are composers, like famously a French composer from the mid-20th century named Messiaen, who became so obsessed and so knowledgeable about birds, and he transcribed so many bird songs that, you know, he could clock a species, you know, male, female, etc., off of like a split second of bird song, because he just knew their calls so well, and he incorporated it into his music in various ways, essentially quoting them.
The first sample, right?
Dude, just drop this badass bird.
Trying to think. There are funny like TikTok accounts of people that transcribe like birds and seals and stuff, and then emulate them on their instruments, and it shows like footage of the bird, and then they transcribe sheet music, and then shifts over to the person on like an oboe trying to recreate it exactly. And some of them are pretty amazing, because seals in particular sound like ring modulated analog synths, because they're like, and they have all these sounds that are just bizarre that you wouldn't realize is coming out of essentially a vocal cord or whatever. I actually don't know how they vocalize, but in any case, yeah, that to me, music. This is why I say one of my little catchphrases is that almost every art is emblematic of the amazing capacity of human creativity because they are fundamentally artificial inventions. But music is the art we discovered. It's not the one we invented. That's a kind of, it's a little bit of a Hallmark card thing because obviously all the rules of music, like if an alien, here's the thought experiment. If we encountered an extra solar civilization, music, this A440 to A880, not that this piano is actually in tune to those exact frequencies, but like A440 to A880, there's nothing inaccessible about that to any civilization in the world. Now, the specific way that we
hear.
Well, but that's just vibration of a medium. Like, and even space has dust in it. Like, vibration is detectable in space. That's why they say, oh, we just heard what a black hole sounds like. Now, the medium is such that the pitch is like 90 octaves below anything we could ever possibly. The oscillations are like the size of the Earth. You know, I mean, but it is an oscillation. That's all pitch is. In fact, there's a fantastic demonstration of this in Adam Neely's YouTube channel where he takes a sample playing like a C, and he's like a low, I can't remember what note it is, but he plays a note that's not A440. And then in just using a sampler, he just speeds it up so that note is repeating 440 times per second, and it becomes an A. We cannot not hear it as an A, because that's the way he puts it in the video is so beautifully succinct, where he goes, all pitch is a thing happening a certain number of times per second. And no matter what that source sound is, you repeat it 440 times per second, it's gonna sound approximately like that pitch, not necessarily the color of a piano though, obviously. And so any species in the world, these are physics that are just endemic to the universe as we, like, there is, acoustical physics are just natural part of reality. So the question
Here's
is...
one then.
All right.
I think play is another. I think if you're engaging with a species with the intellectual capacity to be interacting with you, by definition, they would have had to have formed social groups, learned things, which means definitely play has to be a part of their history. So play as a concept, the idea of like experimental play,
right,
would also be there.
I think that does anthropomorphize a little bit though, because like, what if a species evolved in an ant-like capacity that's pure hive mind, but for 1 billion years eventually developed this kind of Rachni-like ability to leave their planet without a spaceship? Like, we could encounter an alien civilization that has no corollary to us being a social species. I wouldn't be surprised if what you're saying is a reasonable assumption, but I also think
you're right. No, I'm making an assumption that anything that would be in that position of intelligence to do that task would be a social species. But you're right, that's also an assumption.
But the thing that tantalizes me is the idea that maybe there's forms of intelligence that we just don't even like. We have hive intelligence and we've got individual intelligence, but maybe that's 2 out of 10,000 categories, and we just because nothing on Earth evolved that way, we have nothing to compare it with. All of our science is basically comparative. So we're looking at what's around us.
It depends on, like there's different schools of thought, right? Because there's the convergence theory as well. There's the idea that actually there are a limited number of forms. If you look at like dolphins and sharks is the obvious example, like basically the same animal, completely different evolutionary paths.
Yeah, like bats and birds.
That's just maybe there are optimal solutions to these problems.
Well,
maybe we're going to go out into the universe and find a lot of sharks.
It could be that, Star Trek aliens where they're basically humans, but with, facial makeup. Maybe that's not so far off.
Michael Westmore makeup is the reality of...
It's true, like what are the consistents? Nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, helium, like Earth and the living forms on it are made of the most abundantly generic shit in the universe. And gravity, different planets are going to have different forms of gravity, but even our solar system has a few planets, Venus and Mars, that are pretty similar size and makeup, broadly speaking, to us, with different environmental... It's like the idea that, Earth-like planets with Earth-like conditions could be...
We'd find sharks on bats on Earth-like planets, but we'd find completely different forms on literally any other kind of point.
I don't even think I'm saying anything that you could possibly say I'm right. I'm just saying it doesn't.
No, I think we've solved this. I think
the Drake equation.
I think
got its final value.
We're going to call up one of those billionaires, get a spaceship, and mount a mission next week. It's going to be great.
I just want to
Alanah can steer.
imagine all of the people listening right now at some point in
been
the
on the
last 10
journey.
minutes.
I think there's very few at this point.
Did we get high? There's some people right now that are listening.
I'm not the only one who's not actually drinking coffee.
Yeah.
Doesn't this show have that energy most episodes though? The kind of like, for me, this show is like the 12 o'clock. You've just been to a bar with friends. You're back at someone's place. You're having a rambling conversation.
Isn't that these are the conversations I live for, man. It's so funny. Austin and I will call each other. Be like, hey man, what's going on? I was like, so anyway, existentialism and
I know. It's not even that. It's not even what's going on. It's, hey, I have a very specific question for you. Like
that
simple
spawns,
question, simple answer. 1 hour later, never ask the question. We're just on tangent 40.
Every conversation, there's never a wrap up. It's always like, I have to hang up the phone now. something is happening that's precluding us from having this,
what we should do?
Having this conversation.
You know how like Zoom accounts will have like the timer that after 40 minutes it just cuts you off? We should just install like a kill switch on the phone at 60 minutes. It just goes, because otherwise, we'll never
the kill
intervene.
switch is this. Intro the show, because we got to get out of here.
It's true.
You're the host.
Austin's the host.
All right. Well, hi.
Please carry on, Austin. Seriously, get it done. It's fine.
I know. Well, this was Play, Watch, Listen. Sans, our host, our real host, who is maybe in
Undisclosed location.
Somewhere.
She's definitely having some kind of Nathan Drake style gallivanting about the world, it would seem. So, like Sans Alanah, that's. Wait, I have to do it that way. That's right. Mike Bithell, game designer. That's
Director,
Troy Baker, game actor. I'm Austin, game composer. All of us limited by our medium and incapable of anything outside of games. And
we are landlocked at this point.
Yeah,
sure.
And that was today's show, about which I have no idea.
The title of this episode is going to be Alanah is Gone, and this is what happens when she's not here.
Yeah, metastatic.
We ramble in Alanah's we ramble in Alanah's absence.
It's true, unsupervised. I did like the last time where it was called Mike, Troy, and Austin interview each other, was what she called it last time we did this.
You're a better writer than that, Alanah. Come on.
You can do this, Alanah. We believe in you.